make decisions on how to interact with our spouse, we could actually choose a time that might say the right thing at a really bad time. Okay, and it might cause more problems than we should have been wise.
You're right, and that's a great point on a personal level.
Right.
That something needs to be said. Is this the right time to say it?
Right.
Look at the person's face, their eyes, and determine, can I wait on this
personal
one?
level.
Right, and are they
said,
too much
is
in an
this the right
emotional
time
state
to
where
say
this
it?
is not going
Look
to be
at the
heard
person's
or
face, their
taken
eyes,
the right
and
way?
determine,
Right.
can
Am
I
I
wait
too
on
much
this
in an
one?
emotional
Right.
state
That's
to
a good
where
point. It's the right
this
time
is
for me.
not
Yeah.
a good time to actually
Right.
make
Look at
this
the
change or
person's
this
face,
statement?
their eyes, and determine,
Obviously, there
Am
are
I too
times
much
that we're
in an
forced
emotional
into change. And that's a sad place to be in as a leader. Because if you've been forced into it, then maybe there could have been something you could have prepared for that would have led you from not having to make this decision at maybe not the best time.
So I think, John, that when it comes to decisions, these obviously, in my opinion, are referring to big decisions.
Of
We're
course.
not talking about making change regarding something that only affects you as a leader, maybe
Right.
you and one other person. We're talking
Right.
about big choices
Yes.
that affect the group of
Corporate
people
change, yep.
who are serving with you.
Right.
All right, so these big changes, I think the reason a lot of times the wrong decision is made or the wrong timing is made, whether right or wrong decision, is fear-based.
Yes.
Leaders are afraid to make any choice, so they hold off. Like the mayor of New York, that's what it came down to, a fear.
Yeah, New Orleans, yeah.
And so,
right.
New Orleans, excuse me. Yeah, so a fear causes them to not make the right decision at the right time or any decision at the right time.
Right.
So when they finally do make a decision, it's the wrong time and often
Right.
is reactionary to what's already happened
Right.
and now is also the wrong decision
Right.
at the wrong time because
Right.
you missed the window and you let fear take you past the window of opportunity.
Right, and fear is an immobilizer. Fear is a paralyzer. So when we allow fear to come in, the decisions that we should be making are not made, and there causes all sorts of problems. And people look back at a lot of times their marriage and their their challenges in their family, and they think, well, I didn't do X, Y, Z because I was afraid to do it, and because of my fear, it caused me to not make the decision. But we have to keep this in mind. No decision many times is the wrong
Yes.
decision.
And no decision is a decision.
It is a
You have
decision.
decided to
Yes.
not do something.
Yes.
That is a decision.
Absolutely, 100%.
So let's get that out of our head that, you know what, I just won't do anything. I can't decide. You've decided to
Yes.
not do something
Right.
then.
No choice is the wrong choice is a choice, right?
All right. So when it comes to eliminating fear, you have to understand that there is only one thing that I think is a surefire way to get fear out of our life. The Bible says love. Perfect love casts out fear.
All fear.
So if you love the people you're serving as a leader more than you love your legacy, more than you love what they think about you, if you love them, you are setting yourself up for success to make the right decision at the right time. If you love what people think about you more than you love the person, you are setting yourself up to not make a decision, which is a decision and usually made and forces you to make a really bad one, a worse one, later, reactionary, at the wrong time. Because you love what they think about you more than you love the people themselves and what they need.
Right. And I think another reason why people have fear is not just because they don't love the people that they're in, but because there are so many things that they want to control that they cannot control. And there are decisions they have to make that might be in the realm of the right decision at the right time, but they have no idea how they're going to control it. And to them, not being able to control it is a no-go.
So anxiety.
Anxiety.
And I believe that fear is a foundation
Of
for
course, it
anxiety.
can
So
be,
if
yes.
you have fear in your life,
Right.
not guaranteeing anxiety is around the corner, but it's likely
Right.
that you are struggling with some form of anxiety, which is going to be what you're talking about there.
Right.
So what do we do? Well, if you love people, if you love God, and you throw the love for yourself and the love for what people think about you, it doesn't guarantee making the right choice, but it sure does help. In my opinion, I believe it helps to make the right choice because the Bible says in Proverbs, the fear of man brings a snare, brings a trap.
Right.
And so you're trapped into making the wrong choice at the wrong time. You're trapped into reacting, maybe finally making the right decision, but only after you should have because you're reacting to the mistake, the chaos that took place because you missed your window. Now it's a reactionary right decision rather than a preventative right decision. And it's the fear of man that brought you there.
Right. And when we talk about the right timing, it's not just some voodoo thing where you think, well, how do I know the future? How do I know if this is the right time? I think there are some really important things that even Maxwell brings out.
He does, yeah, on page 237.
That gives us the ability to have time. He mentions understanding, maturity, confidence, decisiveness, experience, intuition, preparation. All these things, if you put them together, I can say boil down to wisdom.
I would say so.
Wisdom.
Which leads to the verse I've got
Right.
today. Proverbs chapter 24, verse 6, for by wise counsel thou shalt make war, and in a multitude of counselors there is safety. Now, Maxwell mentions if you lack experience, get it from those who have it.
Right.
You don't have to be a poor leader because you're young or inexperienced.
Right.
You could be a strong leader by trusting others who've proven they have made good choices. Ask them, what's the right timing? I know this decision has to be made. As a church, we need to go in this direction. It has to happen. When should we make this happen? Get advice from a multitude of counselors, not just your best friend,
Right.
and you are more likely to hit on the right time. But ultimately, the best counselor is always Christ,
Right.
the Holy Spirit, our guide, right?
Always. And that brings into what I wanted to bring into going to when we're talking about the principle of time, going back to that famous passage in Ecclesiastes 3, because most people, they misinterpret this in thinking, well, this is my time to do this, my time to do that, my time. But it's not. And if you read Ecclesiastes 3 and you read it down to the end of this section, he hath made everything beautiful in his time. Also, he has set the world in their heart that no man can find out the work that God maketh from beginning to the end. And I think that's the key to understanding verses 2 through 10, because what Solomon is saying is it's vanity to try to control time outside of getting counsel from the Lord. And he has to actually guide your heart into making wise counsel as far as timing. And that's why I think it's good for spiritual leaders especially to let people know, listen, I am asking God for the right time here on this decision.
As long as you're honestly doing
And
it.
as long
Not
as
just
you're
making a statement.
right, as long as you are honestly doing that, and tell people you're doing that, because there's a lot of times, even as fathers, teachers, any kind of way we are in front of people, we don't know the beginning from the end. We don't understand maybe all the steps, and I'm not saying that God is just going to write it in the stars, but He could give you a piece about certain things that you're about to do, and even though you don't understand it, you go by faith to accomplish something that you would be otherwise fearful about.
If the time is not yet, you know what the difficult part about leadership,
waiting.
John, is waiting.
Yeah.
And leading people to also wait. Because if the leader is anxious
Right.
and impatient, the people are going to be anxious and impatient. And even if the leader is waiting patiently, doesn't mean there aren't people who are impatient.
Right.
So your real task now, the hardship, is keeping the group in line with Christ until the timing does come.
Right. Yeah. Yes. No. From God. Not so hard to have a problem with, but it's with the wait. Not now. That usually we have a problem with, and keeping people being able to wait. Well, that's extremely difficult, because you have to have some decent spiritual maturity to wait.
I would say some deep humility.
Yes.
And then encouraging everyone to do what you said earlier, and that is, God, what's your timing? Not
Right.
what do we want, but keep
Right.
reminding them what does God want.
And this is what the beauty of bringing this into the church atmosphere is, because if the church is founded on Jesus and everybody in that church is indwelled with the Holy Spirit, then they can go to God, the pastor can go to God, the deacons can go to God, and they all should get the same answer.
Well, should. Doesn't mean they always do.
But they should, if they're being honest and humble about it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like God's going to give you advice and the different from me advice. And that's what really concerns me when we talk about, it concerns me when we talk in that realm of, I sought God for counsel and He told me X, Y, Z. Because there are so many people that use that as a crutch, and especially is found out when there are other spiritual people in the church that are like, yeah, well, you didn't tell that to me, and I'm praying about the same thing. I wonder about that sometimes.
Yeah, well, obviously you make a good point. It's hard to nail down sometimes who is right, who's wrong.
Of course.
I do believe that God sometimes does give some freedom in the choice. God doesn't always, I believe, give
Of
a
course.
specific do this on
Yep.
this day, at this time in the day, in this exact way. God can kind of lead in a general direction and then kind of give us the wisdom and discretion where to take it from there. And that's where it can get a little skewed for one person to the next. But
Sure.
we should all at least be going in the same general direction.
Right.
Which, you're right. The
And
real
I'm
concern is when we're
referring
going
to the
different
general
ways.
direction of peace to do a major thing, let's say in a church, should have pretty unanimous
I
consent.
agree with that, yes.
Not exactly the color of how it looks.
Sure,
just okay. Just what should be done. Right.
So, John, the other issue is a fear of making the right decision even at the right time because you know what the consequences will be.
Right.
You know the decision has to be made. You know it needs to be made at this time, but you also are smart enough to realize the fallout from this decision.
Right.
And I think a second reason a lot of leaders struggle with making the right decision at the right time. The first one was fear. I think the second one is a lack of personal strength. They don't think they have the strength to handle what's coming, so they just put it off and hope it will go away, which is kind of foolishness intertwined with the lack of strength.
Right.
But I do believe a lot of leaders, John, get themselves in trouble because they've taken a position of leadership for which they are not prepared. They don't have the strength, spiritual, emotional, physical strength to handle the weight of the choices that position requires.
Right.
And by the way, churches, companies are fools for hiring men or women who are obviously not capable of bearing the weight of the choices that company or that church requires. I think that a lot more choices are made based off of someone's academic ability than someone's character, someone's experience, and their academic ability isn't going to give them the strength to carry the weight of the choices that position will make. Right. Whether it's a pastor who just got out of college, or whether it's a guy given a position as a CEO who just got out of graduate school. It doesn't matter.
Right.
At 25, how much weight can they carry versus the requirements that job will require, that will ask for the decisions. And so they're afraid of the weight they know is coming, or they're going to make the right choice thinking they can carry the weight. The weight is so heavy, then they react,
Right.
and then the right choice is followed by a bad choice because someone bullied them, they got scared of how people handled it, and so they couldn't carry the weight of people's disapproval or whatever it might be, and so now a bad choice follows at the wrong time because they actually did make the right choice at the right time. They couldn't handle the weight.
Right, and that's in a corporate environment and in a church environment, but when you're talking about a family environment, it brings a different dynamic there because, well, you are the leader of your home, and you can't just be replaced.
No, shouldn't be.
So you have to actually, if you don't have the strength in an area, you need to work on either delegating to your wife in some areas that are her strengths, or you got to do your best to figure out a way to, with maybe other people to help you, accountability, going to classes, reading some books, whatever, so that you can lead properly in a position of strength. Emotional strength, physical strength, spiritual strength. I mean, these are things that you actually have to have now that you're going to be the leader of this family. And I think that brings it into another realm because there is no other option.
You're right. I see a lot of parents making poor choices for that reason right there. They don't have the strength personally. Single family home, or might as well be living together, but there's no unity between the parents. And that one parent on their own doesn't have the strength to carry the animosity or the disapproval of their children when they make hard choices. So they just keep giving their kids what they want to make them happy, spoil them. My suggestion, similar to John's, is if you can't work with your spouse, if you're a single parent, then you definitely need to partner with other strong leaders, kind of in a village atmosphere of people you can trust, people that can be on your team to help raise your child, that can support what you're doing to make those hard choices.
Right, and be creative in the ways you actually have that team come together, because it doesn't just have to be family. It can be people in your church. It could be people that listen. There are people that have neighbors that are nice people, that are good people, that really can help sometimes. I mean, be creative in how you actually are using people around you that God has placed around you to actually strengthen some of your weaknesses.
So let's talk about number 2, the right action at the wrong time brings resistance. John, I think a lot of leaders, this is the core of the law of timing.
It is.
They focus on, but it is the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do, and they cannot get over why people won't join them, agree with them, support them in what is obviously the right choice. Maxwell refers to starting like a small group in the 1980s, before that was really happening. And he said it was the right thing. The church needed this. It was the wrong time. Major pushback, major resistance. Finally, when we did it again later, it went very well. And I think leaders, if they don't get this law of timing, they're going to think this law is all about making the right choice. No, we've been talking about the right choice, but as it refers to the right time. And so just because you know it's right doesn't mean you will find success if you're not making it at the right time. So John, what do you think are some signs to recognize off the bat if it's the wrong time?
Wow. Well, in a church environment, if you haven't truly communicated your vision and clearly communicated your vision, then can you blame the people when you try to do something new?
I would say you cannot.
And they don't want to do it? Okay, so that's step one. But I think it's also having an idea without inflating the true growth and the true spiritual potential of your church or your family, and realizing that a lot of decisions that God asks us to make are by faith. And it's very difficult for people to make decisions by faith if they don't have the spiritual muscles to do so.
So you're assuming that the group you're working with is more mature than they actually are.
Absolutely.
And the decision you're making
Right.
is based off of your assumption, not what's actually,
And it
not
might-
reality.
And it might be based on your own level of faith, and it might be based on your own belief that God can do something, right? But you got to be careful, because when you're talking about other believers and you're talking about people that are come from different walks of life, they have to actually, work through their own experiences and work through their own understanding of the situation, which sometimes is very difficult and takes time for people to get on board. And so it almost is like, what do you do when you have all these different people that are coming to the table and have an equal vote to actually get them on the same page? Well, I tell you what you don't do. You don't just rush ahead if you don't know for sure they're on the same page. I mean, even our wonderful politicians, they count the votes before they actually make decisions, right?
Yes, I would say many do.
Yes.
So,
I mean, there we go. I mean, it's not as cut and dry as we might think, but I think there are several factors that we could go. It's been most of the night on what reasons why there is a inability for people to follow leaders when they're trying to do the right thing and it's not the right time. But I think it boils down to one other thing. Yes, God gives, say, a pastor or a father a lot of wisdom and a lot of vision for the future, but the future is not now. And a lot of people, they get that vision and they want to do it tomorrow. And they get that vision and they're on Amazon 5 minutes later trying to figure out, how do I make this happen?
yeah, you're right.
Okay? And there needs to be a wisdom in, God is telling me to go here, but he hasn't really given me the green light to, totally accomplish it yet. And so I think maybe the question is, God, what do you want me to do? God, when do you want me to do it? We never ask God when, do we?
Not often enough.
We just assume that when he tells us to do it, he wants to do it now.
Also on page 237, a great quote. If a leader repeatedly shows poor judgment, even in little things, people start to think that having him as a leader is the real mistake. Right. And ultimately, if we don't get this law right, people will no longer listen to us as leaders. And then are we even leaders if they've stopped listening?
Well, I guess that's the definition of a leader. If people aren't following, then are you a leader? Right?
Out for a stroll.
Well, for a stroll. That's right. So yes, in an arena where people can choose to follow you, yeah, this is a super huge thing. And I think that you can only make a timing flub a few times before you start to lose credibility.
Yeah.
Within, a group.
Especially when it's an obvious
Yeah,
timing
obvious,
flub. Like if no one saw it coming, they're going to give you some grace.
Right.
But if you are consistently making bad decisions
Right.
that everyone else said, what in the world were you thinking? No one else saw this other than you. Why would you do this?
Right. Or everybody else saw the obvious need for a change and you didn't.
Right.
There's that end too. So
I would agree. A couple of those would be enough.
Right. That would be enough. But when you go into the arena of a family, you have multiple mulligans that you get to have, but hopefully it gets better. That's a golfing.
You know what the great thing is about having a family? If you do it right, you start it off when they're young. Those kids don't
Right.
really remember
No,
most
they
of your
don't. No, they
mistakes.
don't.
So
No, they
hopefully
don't.
you got all your mistakes out when they're really young, right?
Right.
And can learn from there. All right, the last thing I want to talk about, the right action at the right time brings success.
Right.
There's not much needs to be said
Right.
there. Obviously, we kind of, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, God's timing, wise counsel. Number 3, the wrong action at the right time is a mistake. So he mentions how people can have this intuition. All right, something has to be done. Something has to be done.
Right.
But if they don't have the wisdom, if they don't know their people well, whether it's business, whether it's family, whether it's church, doesn't matter. If you're not in tune with the people, if you're not in tune of what's actually happening, if you just see action has to be had,
Right.
and you act, it'll be obvious to people you don't act. You're not. Your finger's not on the pulse of the ministry. You just are aware enough something has to be done, and you're just doing things.
Right.
And so people, I think, are going to lose trust in your discretion and your actually desire to be truly connected. They're just going to see you as a mover and a shaker, but that's not really what a lot of people want in leaders.
Right. And that's where a lot of leaders get themselves into trouble. I think the last part of this chapter deals with people knowing the right time and the right action, but they don't actually go after it tenaciously enough to actually make it come to pass. And that's where he gave a couple of instances in the Civil War where if General Lee had just really done what he needed, he knew was right to do, and done it with all his might at the beginning, and his generals did so, they might actually turn the tide there. But then if, the other Union general had done what he was supposed to, then maybe the war would have ended 2 years earlier, because it was not just the right time at the right decision at the right time. It was actually doing the
All
right
in.
action,
Yeah.
all in, and making sure you capitalize on it.
That's a great point.
Because
Yeah.
we might be doing this right thing at the right time, but we take so long to do it that it
Or we're
becomes
half-hearted in the
it
action.
becomes the wrong thing, because it takes so long to do it. A lot of building programs for ministries end up like this. It was the right time, but throughout the process, there's been so much fighting because the lack of vision in the building project. They no longer need the big building because
Yeah.
they've lost half their people.
Isn't that sad?
It's very sad, but that has
I've been
happened.
told multiple times that the worst experience a lot of Christians have had was during a building program.
Absolutely.
I've been told by the pastors
Yes.
that the worst experience they had was overseeing a building
Right.
program.
Right.
Either a movement to a new building or the purchase of land or building on land, whatever.
So there we go. There's the lesson in when you have the right decision at the right time, you need to accomplish it and go for it and be all in. Because if not, you'll let this thing string along so much
for
that it might slip away from you.
years or a decade
And it
plus.
might slip away.
Yeah.
And then you've messed it up. It becomes the wrong decision at the wrong time or the right decision at the wrong time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it can morph into
So
this.
don't let fear control your decisions. You are most definitely going to be at the wrong time if you do. Usually, in my opinion, it'll be reactionary after the fact, either a right decision at the wrong time after, or a wrong decision because it's reactionary at the wrong time. And then fear is just one aspect. Do not let what other people think of you or the legacy you're leaving behind be the ultimate deciding
Right.
factor of your choices. If it's not about love for people, if it's not about wanting the best for them, then you're probably also going to be making the wrong decision.
Right, and obviously fear, but fear is connected with pride. And a lot of times when people are making the wrong decision at the wrong time, or the wrong decision at the right time, is because of pride. And there's usually a legacy involved or an idea to inflate your own self or to have something of your own gain. It's honestly between fear and pride. I think you can find most of the problems people have with leadership.
Probably so. I'll end with this. It was interesting at the beginning of this chapter how Maxwell states the mayor of New Orleans after Katrina basically blamed everyone else. And on media said people didn't inform me. I mean, he's a leader. He should get informed, right? And blamed everyone else, did not take responsibility. And you will find
Right.
that is often the case of very weak leaders. And if they're doing that, expect more of the same. If a leader made a wrong choice at the wrong time, right choice at the wrong time, any of those four options, combinations, if they fessed up to it and said,
Right.
I messed up, I learned from my mistake, forgive me, let's move forward, I think I'd be more likely to follow them. But if they start making excuses, then I'd be a fool to think anything will be different next time around.
Right.
So, as John just said, most cases, you get to choose your leader. All right? Very few scenarios in life are leaders forced on us. To some level, you're involved in the choice of your leaders that affect you day to day. Obviously, on a federal level, widespread elections, I get that. On a day-to-day, your boss, people in the church, spiritual leaders, family, whatever, we choose these people. And so if the people you've chosen are making consistent bad decisions at the wrong time or right time, whatever combination, and not willing to admit it and learn from it, you got to walk away. You are just causing yourself more anxiety than is required and necessary from God in your life, all right? I think a lot of people, John, excuse this by saying, well, it's the man of God. It's what God wants, and I just got to keep going along with it and be a better man and support them in it. Support them what? In their self-destruction, their pride, their fear? No, the Bible does not say to support anyone in that. So find a new leader, or if necessary, be a part of replacing that leader with someone who can actually lead. But do not let the leaders over you, if you can. Do not let them blame everyone else for their choices. They're the leaders. They've got the opportunity to make better choices.
I hear you.
Any final thoughts, John?
I'm just thinking through, all the different things that we talked about when it comes to timing, but when you look at it, people stay in the ministry many times and over time because they just have this overinflated idea of what they can do past the prime of their life. And there's that timing aspect into it.
The time to walk away.
Being very, what time is it to walk away? And is that and that could be go right into this timing issue. Right time, wrong way, wrong decision, right decision, wrong time. I mean, that is also something that you have to be very careful of, and that's where I think a lot of ministries get themselves in trouble, is because the man of God does timing right almost his whole ministry, but at the very end, when it's so crucial to actually set up a pathway for growth in the future, they mess it up.
I love that. The last gift you can give your people as a leader is the right time, the right move, walking away when it's time.
Right, because otherwise you can really set up the church for failure.
You're right. Thank you for joining us tonight. We will get together one more time next Sunday, and then we're going to be out the rest of the month because of Christmas holidays. We'll get back together again in January. So hope to see you next Sunday night at 6 o'clock. Have a good night.